It's important to organize your files, name them, create folders for them. For example, the reference image, and then the actual model you're going to be creating, and even like the cameras, the lights. You can create a different collection for each one of these things. These are fundamental things which are going to help you in the long run. Now we're going to import our shoe last. In this case, I'm literally copying and pasting it from a different Blender file, and then just rotate it to the proper orthographic direction so it can fit the shoe, at least somewhat, and scale. Keep in mind that we are still really working from the front view. We are going to need to change everything to a side view, the right view, right side, for us to keep our perspective or have a clear sense of direction when it comes to modeling using the X, Y, and Z axis. From there, I'm going to change the matte cap. I prefer to use this one because although it has multi-gradient coloring and tones to it, I feel like it gives me a much better sense of the form. Once you select the matte cap you want to utilize, it doesn't have to be the same one. Then we're going to just bring the cube up on the Z-axis and tab into edit mode. I'm going to get rid of one side of the cube, because we're going to utilize mirror modifiers to just replicate what we do on one side for this first part of the model. Let's just go ahead and adjust the plane of the shape for that side. Add some subdivision and just start adjusting the shape. And this is really a block out method to get the core shape of the shoe established. Just tweak the vertices. It's like painting a picture, you know. When you're creating artwork with traditional media, you don't just go straight into detail. Some people have an uncanny gift or ability to just create without references, but most people don't. It requires so much more discipline and practice to just create like with straight detail. But in 3D modeling, from what I've learned, you really want to utilize basic shapes as a base and foundation for any product you're designing or going to be modeling. Just adjust these vertices in place. Doesn't have to be perfectly aligned. We're just working on that form. Once we've done that, we can tab out of edit mode, and then we are going to add a mirror modifier and just change the axis to Y, and then just bring it slightly closer to the form of the shoe last. And we're going to add a loop cut. Let's see, before we do the loop cut, let's extrude and connect these edges. Make sure you have your clipping turned on so it can just automatically connect and not deconnect. So it's all on one edge, so to speak. So, okay. And from there, from the top orthographic view, just start to do the same. And you're going to need to probably do what I'm doing right now and just shift between or alternate between the perspective view and then the top orthographic view until you get that form, again, the base form created for even the top portion or the back of the shoe as well. Since I've been working on footwear modeling, I've come to realize that, again, there's a lot of tweaks and adjustments that you have to do to the form. Sometimes you complete a foundational shape like this and you still want to go back and tweak it some more, but from the side profile view, we're going to just add a loop cut between the side of the shape, obviously, and then start adjusting those vertices where we can have an edge flow that works. to sort of fit around that reference sketch. Now this sketch is not perfect at all. It's not fully symmetrical. It's a little rough, but it's serving as a visual guide, suggestive outline for us to have an idea what form or shapes we want to work with. Next, add a subdivision modifier and just bring the to viewport and the render subdivision up to 3, just for us to sort of see the form taking place. Then from the orthographic top view, we're going to work with the bottom of the form vertices, just bringing them out because it's sort of taper from wide to somewhat thinner from the bottom part of the foot to the upper part. And so we want to create that difference in form. We're just tweaking and adjusting these shapes like so. And you're going to most likely need to alternate between the perspective view and then the top view just to get that form to wrap around the shoe last. There you go. And yeah, something like that. Once you have that outer layer shape somewhat established like this, something similar to this, we're going to add a solidify modifier. You can set the setting for the thickness to 0.002 or 0.0015, whatever you desire. At this stage, it's not as critical or that important, but just a matter of us being able to see some thickness that will help us when it comes to layers overlapping and so on. So from here, we're going to just look at the shape, study and examine it, see if there's anything that stands out as odd or not as accurate as we would like. And then so in this part right here, the top part where the ankle would the top of the ankle would be, we're just going to adjust that, adjust the tip, bring the tip a little bit forward, by selecting just the vertices that are at the very front part of the toe, like that. Now from the top view in edit mode, we're just going to widen the toe box slightly, not too much, just enough though, and then bring the tip of the toe box back a little bit. This is where you have to use your best judgment to work around the form. And where the ankle would be, the top of the ankle would be, we're actually going to make it wider because it shouldn't be that thin. It gets thinner towards the back part of our heel, but like the front part is sort of wide. And this is where, with those vertices at the very top part where the tongue of the shoe would be, we just work with that form. And then there's some concave parts of the shoe that is like opposite of, like, let's say the shank area or just before the back of the heel. This is where you really need to rotate the model and really examine it for things that don't look right. And with training, with doing this, with practicing, you develop a better sense of depth, a better sense of shapes and understanding the flow of the shapes as you design more shoes. Usually whenever I'm doing something like this, I prefer to have a model that's somewhat similar in shape. And when I say model, physical shoe, with me so I can hold it in my hand, rotate it, and just look at it to get a better sense of what I need to do in 3D. Now we're going to tab out of edit mode and just rename the file. We're going to duplicate the bottom edge loop to separate it in order to model our sole. Duplicating the edge from the bottom saves us a lot of time, because rather than just extruding or separating one vertex point and keep extruding, we can just work with the shape. And the areas that we need to be a little wider, we just bring those parts out, and then the areas that need to be concave, we bring inward to hug the side of our feet towards the middle part as it needs to be. So I did notice at the back right there, that's a bit too far out, so we're just going to bring that in, have that better arch. And then selecting that duplicated edge, we're going to extrude it to work with. So just extrude it down, and then I'm going to flatten it on the z-axis. It should look something like this. Just adjust the vertex for each of the corners. And then one of the things that I'm going to do is just adjust the angle slightly, get that curvature. And let's take a look at it in solid mode. Now you see, like, the bottom is flat. It's not going to stay that way, although that is interesting, you know. But we're going to add a loop cut. And then what I want to do is align these on the y-axis. So how I'm doing this, if you're not familiar, it's just S and then shift Y to lock it to the y-axis, and that way I can just grab them both at the same time in X-ray mode to adjust. Now I'm going to raise these, but I was trying to see if I could actually model the shape that way, but then that creates a weird arrow-like polygon with the four shapes. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is just move these bottom vertices up, and then I'm going to extrude them down just like that. Just select those sides, the bottom vertices in the back, which is going to connect the edges, and then just extrude that down. And now if I go ahead and I can add an edge crease to the front part of the heel, and then even like the bottom part of it as well. So I'm going to just connect these to make a plane. Something's off because I have a count that's wrong. So instead of that, I'm going to add a plane here first, and I'm just going to make the back end gun. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Yeah. I'm just going to fill the faces of the vertices connecting or selected to make these faces. So these 4 and the last 3 end guns. And in this process, we're always examining the shape for just minor adjustments to the form where we see anomalies, so to speak, to the shape. But yeah, so far. And now with the back of the heel towards the top part, we're going to taper that a bit and just slide this edge down a little bit. I think that looks good. So we're going to hide with forward slash the top part, top cover, in order to fix the polygon issue that we have towards the back of the heel. The end gun we created, and then the end gun in the very front as well. So we're just gonna go ahead and fill these up. So fill these faces, and then I'm going to, so that end gun right there and this end gun up here, we need to fix. So just control look cut. So I'm gonna add a look cut and then join those vertices in the back, and that should fix our 5 vertices end gun. And this one actually has 4. I didn't even notice. It should be fine, but yeah. All the geometry is properly set, and yeah, it's looking really smooth, no pun intended. But we're going to have to add some edge creases to the bottom in order to create the sharp edges we need to for the outer sole and the bottom. Now we are going to select the top edges of the heel. You can shift and control multiple parts of them, or hit shift and alt to select a range of them. Just make sure everything is selected. Oops. Yeah. There we go. And then from there we're going to add an edge crease. And we're going to do the same thing for the bottom, the corners, and we also need to select the middle. We're getting some artifact in the corner, but once we select these, it should reduce it like that. And if you haven't noticed, the subdivisions are like 4 levels. It's really high. Just don't just don't apply the subdivision yet, or else, you know, you're gonna have some issues. Next, let's adjust the modifiers. We're going to increase the segments to 4 on the bevel, and the amount of bevel that we need on the modifier will be 0.0008 meters. Yours might be slightly different depending on what scale you started with on your model, or if you haven't been applying your scale to the model. Let's see. I think that looks good. Artifacts pretty much all gone in that corner. Okay. I do have to say, you know, although I'm right now editing both meshes to adjust the organic flow of the shape, I see some imperfections. But again, the more you model, the more you develop and you train your eyes to see things that majority of people are not going to see, or people who are just starting out overlook. The subtle details or what creates mastery in any artwork, whether it's a painting, shoe design, whatever it is, a furniture piece, and so on. So right now, just adjusting the form for it to flow a lot better. And keep in mind that this is just the top vamp and the heel portion, the counter portion all together, and the heel. There's still a lot more detail to add, but yeah, within 20 minutes so far, this is what we've been able to accomplish. Now, this really took me more than 28 minutes. I just, for the sake of this video, I cut it to not allow the video to drag on, but be efficient and very beneficial to you. There's a page in the description that will have rendered front, back, and side profile views of the line drawing that you can follow along if you so choose, or even the rough drawing. You can take that and download the version of it and then attempt to create your own version of the shoe. I would love to see what you create. And yeah, you can tag me on Instagram. I could share it in my stories, or maybe even include it on the page for people to see. So you can copy or try to follow along with this tutorial the best you can to the T, but I do recommend being flexible with yourself, allowing your imagination to take you wherever it's going to take you with the shape, the form. Just keep in mind of functionality and intention, and I imagine you're going to be able to create something phenomenal as far as a dress shoe with the workflow I've shared, or I'm sharing with you right now. Next, let's duplicate a shape from one of the planes from the side and separate it to then work around the heel quarter / counter back piece, which is going to be that looping curved shape. This step involves a lot of just, again, same vertices adjusting, extrusions of edges, connecting the vertices just to find a flow for the form. And in this stage, especially when working with curved forms like this, you don't want to create too many cuts, because then you can take away from the smoothness of the actual curves you're attempting to create. Once you apply the subdivision surface modifier, depending on if you have too many edges, it may look off, it may look unnatural, or it's not as smooth as it should be. So in this case, I just extruded around the back, and I'm going to align a couple of these vertices on the other side to sort of mirror one side, and then from there I'm just going to select the front part and then shift D, duplicate it across in the edit mode. Now this is going to create an error in Blender where the face normals are flipped. If you're not familiar with that, the more you model, you become aware that planes have two sides. It gets a lot more technical, but there's an easy fix where you can recalculate normals, and now all the side faces are facing the same direction. That was a horrible explanation, but eventually you'll get to understand what I mean. The more you model and the more tutorials, the more amazing channels you watch, or even follow along with this channel. So once I've joined the edges, you see what I mean as far as errors. So right there, turning the face orientation option on under the overlays menu up top, you get to see the faces red and blue, and it created the error. But now under mesh, I recalculated normals, and you can see it fixed that sharp error that I was getting on the side. So now it's fine. And again, with too many edges, it creates a less smooth shape. I'm going to dissolve this edge right here, and when I tab out, you should see that it's a lot more smooth, and just adjust these vertices. So this is too far out. I'm going to bring them inward, and just in X-ray mode, adjust these shapes, bring them as close to the body as possible, We're gonna end up using a shrink wrap modifier to stick it onto the form so it can flow even better, but this is a necessary process of getting it close to the face as possible. So now I'm gonna add a solidify modifier. Set the thickness to 0.001 meters. And then I'm gonna add a shrink wrap to it. Just move the shrink wrap up. Let's see. And then change the offset to 1 so it shows outside. And then I'm going to select these bottom edges, bring them downward. And then bring that up a little bit. Just adjust the individual vertex vertices. That's looking good. And then up here, I'm gonna actually select all these and bring it up. I might still have too many edges. I'm just going to select these 2 edges and then add a crease to them along with the bottom. And this is where you need to adjust the vertex so it can be as smooth as possible. And for a temporary solution, you can increase the resolution on the subdivision. But then again, we have to work on the other side. Okay, so now I am going to just checking to see if I can improve the offset. So I'm going to reduce the subdivision amount and get rid of some of these edges by dissolving them. And then the top, just adjust these. There is a face at the top part of that back, the back counter that's creating an error. So what I'm going to do after I've reduced the subdivision to 2, I'm going to create another one underneath to solidify. Now we just have some refining to do. Just bring this a bit more up front. I like the flow of that a lot better. And then from there, let's just check the crease to see if it makes any difference in the edges. Not much, but there's that error I was talking to you about on the top. So we're just gonna bring it down, rotate it. If you see there's a face there, we're gonna go ahead in face mode and delete that face. So now we don't have that error. And we can just control and move the edges as we so please. Just add a mean crease. Just bring them down, move these a little bit. Just hide the / the body. At this stage, I recommend saving a duplicate file or backup file and then applying your subdivision surface to the body and then also that counter shape, because we're going to just take something from it as far as a face, Shift D and separate, and that's what we're going to use for the detailing for the side, which is often referred to as the vamp, but it's going to be a combination of the vamp and the throat part of the shoe. So just Shift D, scale it, and we're just going to align these to the x-axis and then also the y to get it to be as straight as possible, and just place it to the side. And this is where we're going to do some more extrusion and start working on that shape. Just scale it down. So just extrude, and we're gonna work on that shape, the side shape. So both sides are going to be somewhat similar, with just subtle differences, and you'll get to see what I mean, because we don't really want to design the shoe to be perfectly symmetrical. No shoe really is symmetrical because our feet are not. But yeah, just extrude. Similar process, adjusting the vertices and the edges to flow around the drawing direction to add edge loops. And then let's just check it out. And just grab the subdivision surface. Let's do a shrink wrap. I'm gonna bring the subdivision surface back up top and shrink wrap, then the solidify. One of the things you can do is you can also copy the modifiers from a previous object shape, and similarly to how you would link materials. If you're not familiar with that, basic user search will help you, but even just again in the object mode, tabbing Control L, you'll see a menu that allows you to be able to link or copy different options and features and so on. But we're going to then, once we have our thickness and solidify set, just continue to work around that shape so it can fit the puzzle piece of the back heel. And then let's see, I'm gonna shift D and duplicate it to the other side and work on that side. Let's get rid of these and just, well, we don't need all the extra geometry. In fact, I might still have too much geometry now I'm looking at it. But because of the curve, how much curvature we're going to need for it to flow, I think we'll be fine with what we have so far. Might dissolve some edges, but if it's not necessary, I'll keep it the way it is. Main crease in the bottom as well to kind of sharpen that. Just adjusting those, and you kind of see what's happening right there. And just reduce the thickness again, and at this point, again, save your file, save a backup. And I'm just testing to see if I need an increase in that just corner. That works. Okay. After saving a backup of the process so far, I've applied all of the modifiers to this object, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the edge slightly to be overlapped by the back, but by the back piece. How I'm going to do that is through the use of the proportional edit and shift locking it to the x-axis, and that's going to allow me to be able to just shift it over. Now, something very subtle, you'll be able to sort of like see a gap between the two layers, but that can be fixed easily with just an extrusion and then bringing it down and outward slightly, or increasing the thickness of the actual pieces individually. That will create some denseness between it, and there'll be less space visible, if that makes sense, between where the back counter and that mid vamp connect together. Now this is where you can start to really narrow in and really get really tight and close to fix subtle imperfections, but these are the things that people don't see at first glance, but make the overall project unique and showcase and demonstrate realism. Now, I don't need this completely perfect because there's another object I'm going to be modeling that's going to overlap and overlay on top of it, which is going to serve as a padding for the back of your heel. Now, on the first part of the model, which was the base, we're going to delete the back part of it because we're only going to utilize the front. to shape our toolbox, which also connects to part of the vamp. But then we're gonna just extrude the rest of one side to fit the back heel counter shape. So we're gonna connect them this way and just add some edge creases, and it's really thick, so this is where applying scale and then either linking the modifiers or adjusting the numbers yourself manually comes into where you can make sure the thickness is somewhat even. And we're just gonna go ahead and just work on connecting them. And yeah, the more time you spend in Blender, I've realized that you get really comfortable. And it's not just Blender, it's every software, whether it's Photoshop, video editing software, and so on. Okay. Just adjust this back, bring it out a little. And this, no, it needs to go back in, maybe down. That looks, there's something here. There you go. And just connect these. This is where you can easily think like, oh, I need to subdivide more, but it's not about you subdividing more. It's about laying down that foundation to where you don't have to work so destructive that you can't come back from it. We're going to delete this part because we don't need all of that geometry. Just going to work with just this vertices and these edges. Now I want this to overlap inward, so I'm gonna bring this in. Just, you're always navigating at an angle on a perspective view to just check for errors or things that don't make much sense visually. An edge loop, and then bring this inward. And you can already see like the shoe is taking form from the top, and even the perspective. There's something like the toolbox is looking a little funky and wonky, but we're gonna fix that. Just need to keep adjusting, maybe add another edge loop. But again, the more edge loops we add, or loop cuts, the more we have to adjust the vertices to try to make them smooth. So I'm pretty satisfied with how it's connecting. Now let's just do this right here. Let's bring this downward. Oh, this is looking good. All right. And on the right side, let's just double check. I feel like it can be a little better. Bring this outward, bring this out. Inward. Oh, now it's looking good. And then, as far as the front, I think we don't need this edge loop right here, so I'm just gonna dissolve that, bring these down, just work on that shape. There's a lot of geometry in the toe, like a toe area at the front, so this is where we're going to have to use the edge slide to spread them apart to where they're not so tight, and you can already see the form is becoming a bit more loose and smooth. So that's working out okay. I think that's looking good. Let's bring these back, bring these forward. Edge flow is another thing that, you know, it takes some practice to get used to. but it's very essential for you to understand, especially if you're working with forms that are more organic and not so hard surface rigid. Just slide these. Having a good sense of spacing between the different geometry, whether it's the edges or the vertex or vertices, can make a big difference in the model. I see some defects in the shape right there. So that's a bit more smooth, but I still have that up in the front that I need to adjust. But so far, I'm satisfied with this. Now I'm going to adjust that sole because I feel like it's a bit too thick. I'm going to select these bottom edges within the X-ray mode and Shift Z to bring them up because they are a bit too thick. And very bottom, I'm going to align on the Z-axis to 0 so they can all be on the same level and plane. Again, there's a little defect right there. Just gonna bring this inward and that should fix that. Okay. And that side, I think it's good too. There you go. Now, with the vamp or the toolbox slash vamp, what I want to do is just add an edge crease to that side and just bring it inward. Just I'm gonna bring this down up. Just check it. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on that tongue. But before I can do that, what I need to do is get rid of this back part right here. So I'll delete these faces and delete these faces. So what I'm going to be left with is a shape almost like a T shape. This one has 4 vertices, so I can just adjust them that way. Bring them upward. Just align them. Bam. Okay. I'm gonna add some edge crease there and a loop cut. And with the shape underneath, we're going to adjust the front so we don't have that artifact that's showing between the front toe box overlapping each other. So just gonna go ahead and use the proportional editing tool to just move a bunch of those faces together. Just like that. And now it's looking good. Alright. And I'm just going to add an edge crease to the side and then turn off the proportional edit and just slide the edge so it can be a bit sharper. And I want to actually rotate this and flatten it. But let's actually bring this up, rotate it, and this one rotate it as well, bring it back, and slide the edges for this. There you go. Something like that. If you've been drawing shoes like me for many years, you've come to realize that a lot of the form has to do with how the shapes work together, like the line movement. Let's call it that. And so working and making lines and creating contrast and some sort of asymmetrical balance, there's a practice that you have to do to realize what works really well. And so with this, the different pieces overlaying with each other, I mean, this is what's making the shoe as unique as it is. At this stage, what you want to do is just really observe the overall shape and shoe connection so far to see what's sticking out too much as far as vertex from different angles. What else? And just tightening up the overall layers of the actual parts of the shoe. And anything else that sticks out that you see as an anomaly, just moving them up, down, sideways, whatever you need to do to adjust those points. I've learned to never rush the process whenever I'm creating, whether it is a drawing I'm creating or a logo for a client, whatever it is. I don't get in a habit or mental state of rushing. I understand deadlines and their importance, but at the same time, whenever you rush, you have a high probability that you're going to miss things and you forget things because there's this pressure that you've added on yourself or you've allowed to come on you, which blinds you in a way. And sometimes even the slightest mistake or error that you aren't paying attention to can cost you later on. Imagine sending something to a client where they need to 3D print it, but then come to find out part of it was sticking out and it becomes very obvious and annoyance. Now we've got the core of the design for the shoe complete. What we need to do next is just some polish work, detailed accents as far as those additional elements that's going to give it some flair. To start out, I'm going to shift duplicate part of that plane, just two faces, and separate them. We're going to make sure that the settings as far as the thickness and the thickness level of the solidify is a bit more than the regular skin or the outer part of the shoe, and we're just going to work on that shape to align it to the drawing. And this is where you can add some more edge loops to give you, or loop cuts to give you some more control. I think that's good right there. Underneath the solidify, I'm going to add another subdivision surface modifier and then just adjust the thickness of it, and then that should be good. Just need enough dimension to separate the layers. Next, we're going to just touch this up, and then that's looking good. Now we're going to add a accent piece by where an eyelet or tongue would be for the shoe, and we're just going to shift duplicate that plane and then let's bring it out. Just move it outside of skin and just straighten it up, because we're going to ultimately make it a cube or rectangular, I should say. Just add some edge loops for support. And then I'm gonna increase the solidify and also shrink wrap it to the actual shape. Just rotate it for placement. And once you've done that, we're going to just observe it and then Make sure you set the origin to the geometry. That'll give you a bit more control. Just rotate these. And we're going to apply the shrink wrap because we no longer really need it in the modifier. We just really need to solidify and subdivision for now. And on the other side, we're going to select part of the front and Shift D and repeat the same process to create a accent piece for the toe box, which is going to be like a steel tip. Let's see, just adjust that. Shrink wrap, gonna need to bring it forward a little bit. Increase the size. And I'll just need to add some loop cuts after we adjust that. There you go. Let's make it straight. There you go. Now, why is this acting weird? Okay, just need to scale this up. Bring it back. Scale this up. Scale this. And sometimes with the shrink wrap modifier, you need to be aware of how far that object you're shrink wrapping from is from the object you're shrink wrapping to. That's almost like a tongue twister right there. Okay. Okay. Some more cut and then just tweak it. Because with this, it's hard to select an edge and just Shift Z or Shift X to align it all together. You have to sort of do it manually. There might be another way to do it, but let's just go ahead and do it this way. Okay. I'm gonna add a bevel modifier on top of the solidify, and then just adjust the amount of the bevel. You can keep the segment to 1, but I kind of don't like it that straight. So what we're going to do is I was trying to see if the bevel should be underneath the solidify, but I think it's good where it's at. So let's just rotate the tip a little bit because I don't like it just going diagonally across. And set the origin to it to have a bit more precision control. That looks good. And then from here, we're going to select the back of the heel, bring it up a little bit, and then Shift D and separate to create another shape, which is going to be an extension for the back of the heel. And with this, we can just extrude it downward and fill. And we're going to need to select those edges and add a crease to it. No need to add a loop cut now because of how it was extruded. The normal was not facing the right way, so we're gonna flip the normal. Now all our normals are facing the direction they're supposed to. Okay. Now next, we're going to just adjust that. Bring it a little bit more up. There's a little bit of separation between them. Just enough distinction. Okay. One part of the mid vamp, I'm going to duplicate the top part of it and separate it. And just scale it inward. So this is going to be a layer underneath or in the back inside. I think that visually that's going to create some uniqueness. And again, more flair to the design. Aesthetically, it's going to create something that is not very common, at least for an Oxford dress shoe or shoes like this, the goal is not to create what has already really fully been done, but to upgrade in a way, or improvise and make it unique in my own vision, so to speak. So, all right. And then what we're going to do is just align this straight and just try to keep this tight to the actual body, because if you're thinking of functionality while you're also designing, you have to think of how would this be possible. I added an extra vertex, or duplicated an extra vertex, so I'm going to delete that and dissolve that one, dissolve that one. Geometry is good, but going back to functionality, you want to design with intention, obviously, but think of functionality. If an engineer is going to, or a physical shoe designer is going to need to tailor and build this, how are the pieces going to connect? How much space do you need between overlaps for them to be able to sew or glue or use whatever method they need to in order to realize the shoe? So whenever I'm creating anything, whether it's a furniture piece or a gadget, in this case a shoe, I am thinking about that functionality and the utility and purpose on how it can be made real. Okay. Now, just with those adjustments, subtle touches, more observations, and just minor corrections that I'm noticing, I'm gonna add a cut here and bring that out. Bring this one a little in. Now, why would it matter, if these little details like these are not quote unquote corrected versus, actually doing them? Well, if we're going to animate this, or if we're going to take product render type shots of this, we're going to need at some point to capture some close-ups, some detail, to highlight the distinctive features of the shoe. So we might as well get it done right and take the extra time it requires to make these adjustments. And see, it's a lot of just shape manipulation to get this to fit just right. There's not too much space in between. Okay, I think that works right there. And you can see at the top, just that subtle overlap, how it gives it a different feeling, a different tone and shape. And I'm gonna shift D and add some accent to that rear heel. And we're just gonna go ahead and add a shrink wrap and bring it on top. We need to solidify after the shrink wrap, and that way it's going to bring it outward. We can just reduce the size of that a little bit. That was a bit too thick. That's good right there. And then I'm going to add some cuts. Really just shift these edges, and then we're going to end up scaling it together. Just align everything to make sure everything is straight. Now you can shift Y and align them to the Y axis. And we're just gonna scale it in, and then do the same thing for the top. Actually, let's just go ahead and move these out, and we're gonna delete these vertices and just get rid of these and then slice it up through subdivision, and then slide these edges. That makes it a lot more accurate and tight. Now with this top one, we're going to bring it down because it's overextended and it's creating those artifacts. Let's bring this up, bring this down. So it's just within that parameter of the skin. And sometimes if you don't have your scale applied, it could create some issues as well. Just to keep that in mind. But I'm gonna rotate these and bring it up. Bring this one slightly down, and then we're gonna duplicate this and then repeat the process of just adjusting the height. There you go. And with this, if you have applied your shrink wrap modifier, it will allow you to then be able to just control these edges and shift them and move them however you want to flow with the shape. Okay, now to create an interior padding inside of the shoe, I've brought in a version of the form that I initially created for the first mesh based on the shoe last. This is going to be an interior padding, so I'm just adjusting the form to fit inside, as you can see here, but then again going to have to adjust these shapes to be as tight as possible without overlapping too much, to where they show, outside or through the skin. And then this is just adjusting, and you can increase the height to match, and just form fitting that inside of the shoe. Okay. From here, bring this back. I don't necessarily need this to connect with that back piece of the tongue, but what I can do is, let's see, I can extrude that up to add another layer behind that piece, which is for the tongue. Just adjust it. Getting comfortable using the X-ray version as far as feature when you're viewing your model X-ray mode, it's very beneficial, especially if you're adjusting and moving vertex or vertices a lot. Yeah, it can save you a lot of time. So there it is. So I've increased the thickness to add more believability to the padding. So I think it's working. I'm just gonna add another cut to give me more vertices to be able to control and better tighten to the shape. Let's see, that's looking good right there. Okay. Slightly off. Okay, that's good. The next detail is going to be working on the collar lining, which is going to duplicate a face for this one, and then just bring it out slightly. For this, we don't want any crease or edge creases to it. We just want it to be creaseless, and then utilizing that shape, we're just going to extrude the edges around. So we're going to start off on the side, go to the top view if you need to, or in perspective. Just go slightly around and keep extruding. You could also duplicate at this point and just connect it, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do this the hard way. Just rotating, and then rotate these on y-axis, and continue with the extrusions, bring it out to the x-axis, and then just repeat. And then more extrusion right there. Now we have, this shape, but what we're going to also do is try to align these to where we could even control both of them on that x-ray view while working on just one side. Why not? So from here, just adjust the height, and then we're going to add some density to it, add some solidify. And let's just look at it from the top view. In fact, what I really want to do is I want to actually extrude this. So instead of using solidify, we're going to extrude the edges of the top and just scale it in, extrude it down, and it should give us almost like this horseshoe, like hollow shape. And we're just going to work on that form so it is just on the top of the edges. There you go. It's a lot of toggling in X-ray mode. Just rotate these edges. And from the top view, just sort of align it the best possible. Let's see. So we're getting there, but the bottom I would really like to be straight. So let's just do this and rotate it and bring it up a little bit. It doesn't need to be that low. Slowly getting there. Just a little bit of corrections to make. And just bring this and bring this back. There you go. And a little bit more forward. Bring this forward. And slightly out. Bring this forward. And then bring it down. Okay. You can already see how this serves a purpose, not only for comfort for the back of the heel of a person, but also it hides the imperfection that would be created through the cutting of the fabric or whatever material that would be used, the leather, for the actual shoe. So unless it was sliced by like some machine, but if it's going to be done by human hands, most likely it will have imperfections. Okay, I'm just gonna add some thickness to it and solidify. I think that's looking good. Bring this inward a little bit. This out. This out. This one needs to come out a little. Alright. Just gonna add a little cut there, but that's not necessary. Okay. You really get to see how much time is spent in the little details to get something like this even complete. Alright. Now that's looking good. Just take a look at this and bring it out. Yeah. Now just final touches to the tongue. It looks great. Okay. So now for this next part, we're going to add some insole padding. I'm just going to go ahead and select these faces of the sole. With a 3 level of subdivision, and delete this bevel I added. I'm just gonna to that, and then add a solidify and change the offset direction, and then I'm gonna scale it down slightly so it fits just above the sole. And then from here we're going to go in edit mode and just adjust the edges a little bit more so it can really fit inside and follow the flow of it and not stick out of the side of the skin once we turn back on the body and the vamp and so on. Okay, so that's looking good. What I'm going to do is, let's see, I was trying to see if the solidify could be on top. Yeah, that would work. Okay, so I'm just gonna reduce that and then apply the solidify, and then from here we're going to select the bottom edges and then add a mean crease to it so that way it becomes sharp, and you should get something visually like this where the top is smooth and the bottom is sharp. And then from here we're going to select part of the middle two faces. We're going to do an eye to inset and then scale it in to just create the isolation of that shape, but then GZ to bring it up. An extra level of padding or layer of padding for the inner part of the feet. And let's see, it looks a little bit blocky, so what we're going to do is just gonna slide these edges. I need to grab one of these edges, slide. Let's get in there. It still look a little bit blocky on that side. I'm gonna slide this one inward. You start to see again the relativity between the distances and how it smoothens out the shape. A little bit bumpy. Gonna bring this down. I think that's working. That works. And for the front, I'm gonna bring this down slightly. And let's bring back the shoe, and you can see what I mean, like part of it is sticking out, so we're going to need to work from the top x-ray view to just adjust the overall shape just to bring it inward. That way none of it is really sticking out. Okay, in the front, bam, look at that. We're getting there, almost there. Now we need to work on the stitches, and there's really two places I'm going to add stitches on this specific shoe. Whatever you're creating, you can decide where it would make sense for you to add stitches or where it might be connected by glue, but focusing on this accent piece, we're going to select an edge. Just make sure it's like the complete outer edge that goes around, and then we're gonna shift D and separate that. We don't need the solidify on this, so we can hide that or delete it. And then we're going to just adjust the form with the proportional edit slightly so it fit inside. And we're going to space with the loop tools. This is a feature that you can set up in the preferences. And then so once we've done that, we're going to select everything, and the checker deselect tool or option is going to be our friend on this. When you go to the select menu, just checker deselect after selecting everything and delete the faces that is selected, and then we can come back and add a skin modifier to this. So I'm just going to name it and generate skin. And then in edit mode, you can control A to turn off the proportional edit to make it smaller, and you can already kind of see what it's doing visually, the effect that it's having. And you could decide to leave it that way and add some thread texture to it. You can decide to go into sculpt mode and take the piece behind it and add some depth between the stitches, but again, that's a lot more work. But what I'm going to do is just extrude this to the inside, and then we're going to just bring it out slightly. Let's see, there you go. I just add a subdivision to it, and then just bring it out a little bit to where it almost looks like it's sewn in. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. So we want to select the outermost edge. You might need to, yep, I got it. So once you've done that, you can repeat the same process where you shift D, separate it. Using the proportional edit tool, I enlarge the range of it and then just use it to bring these edges in the edit mode out, and then just work on that shape to where it fits inside where our thread is going to be placed in respect to the overall shape. Just adjust that, and then I think that looks good. I don't need all these. I just need that front part right there. So this is where I envision the seams are going to be. So just bring it out a little bit and go ahead and shrink wrap it to the actual shape if we need to, and then space it evenly. Adjusted the shape. Just move it back. And that's another thing. Even with this technique, the shrink wrap will help and be beneficial to you. But then again, the loop tool and making sure everything is evenly distributed space-wise as far as the vertex, that's also very beneficial. Now we're going to repeat that process where we check or deselect and delete those edges, and then add a skin modifier again, and just repeat the same process where you scale it down. And I use X-ray mode just to sort of give me a visual reference on the opposite side how big it could be, or it should be, because I don't want the threads to be super big on one side and it's thin on the other one. So okay, that's looking good. Let's repeat that same part where we extrude the edges, but before we do, I noticed this little detail. I'm just gonna duplicate this within the edit mode. Yeah, okay, that works. But now you see it's slightly off. I'm gonna bring this inward, bring that inward. That looks good. And selecting all of them, we're gonna extrude. I'm gonna turn that on, mark as root, and then that should give us that chain-like oval shape that crosses between the skin. So that's good. All right. For the subtle imperfection on the thread, you can turn on smooth shading on the skin and just adjust the vertices just a little. Now the branding begins. We're going to brand the shoe. I'm going to bring in this plane for the ground, the floor, bring it down just a little bit, and then just underneath, just check to make sure it's just slightly almost touching. And then from here, I'm going to import my vector logo. And it's important that it's vector because you're not going to be able to do this with any other file format. So SVG, and we're going to extrude the faces for the logo to add some depth to it. You could also do this in the geometry option, to where you just add dimension to it, but I'm gonna just extrude it because it's going to the side of the heel of the shoe, which is flat, it's straight, so there's no bending that we're really going to need to do. The logo is going to be placed on the side of the heel, so it will work out perfectly because it's straight. And this is where you need to make sure however much extrusion you added, it makes sense to where you have enough of it slightly overlapping to the shoe. Now I realized that I had the logo on the wrong side, so I brought it to the other side and I mirrored it to fit the opposite side, rotate it, and there it is. I also duplicated part of the symbol, the icon, and placed it on the top opposite side of the tongue of the shoe to add some more branding to it. And so from here, let the staging begin. We are going to adjust the plane and just condense it to where it's not so wide. We don't need it to be that big. And then from there, once we have the edge and the vertices closer, extrude that edge up, add a bevel to the back corner, and then segment it, and followed by a shade smooth. Now from here, we're going to bring on our camera from the right side and just zoom out, and we'll adjust the camera to where it has a good focus, proportion wise and composition to the shoe. We're going to then add a circle and then scale it down to view. I'm going to isolate it out by / and then just extrude the edges of the circle. And then we're going to add a subdivision and solidify to it, just some depth. And then from there, an array modifier, I'm going to increase the array to create a pattern. And then once we've done that, we can then add another array modifier and duplicate the array modifier and then just adjust the positioning of it to where we have an overlapping grid of circles. So something like that. Using Shift D, we're going to create multiples of them, and then I'm going to go ahead and bring back all of our objects from our scene. Going to add a cube and scale it, and that's going to go behind in that corner. Just place it there, and just isolate the cube, add a subdivision surface modifier to it, add a bevel to it, and then we're going to add a loop cut in the middle of it and just bring it back and bevel that. That way we're creating just some additional visual elements for the backdrop in our scene, where it's not so plain. So I want to add some depth of field to the render. So what I'm going to do is bring in an empty, scale it to the shoe, and then selecting the camera, we're going to turn on our depth of field, and then add some light to our scene. I'm going to go to the Cycles Render Engine, turn on my GPU, update some settings, and then bring in a area light so we can see what's going on. If not, we're not going to see anything. I've increased the aperture of the camera's lens and also set the target for the depth of field to the empty. I'm going to add a matte material, rough brown texture to the back part of the counter of the heel, and we're going to link the toe box to it as far as materials. So whatever we change in color to that, it will affect the other one. Then we're going to add a gold metallic yellowish color. We're gonna update the colors to where it makes more sense, but right now I just want to link the different parts that are going to share the same tones. And then I'm just going to create a second material for leather, something that's not so rough. And then for the sole's also going to have two different tones. And then just naming the different files, and you can easily just sample part of the color that you selected prior. And then once we have each part of the shoe linked together, then there's a website I'm going to share with you, which is a resource I use all the time for color scheme and color harmony. Just going to select this one, and then one more tone for the interior, different material slightly, and then bottom of the sole, the inner sole, that needs a color of its own as well. Okay. Once everything has a tone, including the stitches, I'm just going to take a preview of it. And then this is where we adjust the roughness of the different materials, just to kind of give it some dynamics for the texture. And you can add more imperfections with like a noise shader, or even an image texture of actual leather, or PBR shader of some sort. But even as it looks right now, we're making progress to make a presentation that will blow people away when they see it. So just adding some accents of gold to the ring, the back piece, and then backdrop. I wanted to break up the perfect circles, so I'm going to extrude part of those inner shapes, just some random selected pieces. I think that makes it even more interesting visually, so where it sounds so repetitive. This is one of my favorite sites to sample colors from, coolers.com, or colors. I guess it's really just colors, but they have an extra O in there. But these colors work harmoniously so well, and it's almost timeless. A lot of them are timeless. Some of them have a dated feel to them, but this comes to where the application matters. What type of object or product or design piece you're building that require those tones. And so I'm going to sample some colors from here to update. And then one of the things you can do is you can literally copy and paste the color codes, as I'm doing right here, and then it automatically updates the shoe. But yeah, rather than guessing what works, you can head straight to the source like the website, and the possibility of what you can create is truly limitless. More footwear tutorials are on the way. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications to know when the next footwear concept comes out.